Hello and welcome to the Vaults of Terra. My name is Ed and today we're going to be continuing with our overview videos with a quick look at the Imperial Navy. Now the Imperial Navy is one of the arms of the Imperial military and is in charge with all the aerial and space-based combat that takes place within the Imperium, although it may call on other armed forces for support. The exception to this rule is the Inquisition, the Mechanicus and the Space Marine chapters, who all have their own independent navies, but they will usually cooperate for the good of the Imperium with the Imperial Navy. The other exception here are the rogue traders, who control ships and fleets independently of the Navy's control under an Imperial High Charter. Now, the Navy was formerly part of the entire Imperial Army, which also included the ground troops, but however after the Horus Heresy these split into the Imperial Navy and the Imperial Guard. Now, the structure of the Imperial fleets is arranged around the 5 segmentae majoris that comprise the Imperium and are based at the 5 segmentum fortresses. Now, the fleets are named after the segmenta which they are based. These fleets are then subdivided into smaller fleets patrolling individual sectors and subsectors, again generally named after the area in which they are protecting. For an overview, the segmentum Solar Fleet is based on Mars, the segmentum Pacificus is based on Hydrofor, the segmentum Obscurus is based at Cypera Mundi, the segmentum Tempestus is based at Bacca, and the Ultimus segmentum is based at Cardunish. Now, the fleet personnel within the Navy have their own unique ranks, but are integrated into the Imperial command structure. The Navy is controlled by 5 Lord High Admirals, one of whom is a member of the High Lords of Terra. Below these Lord Admirals are various sector commanders and battle fleet commanders, and individual ship captains and junior officers. Below them are many non-commissioned officers controlling the work gangs and various crew on a ship. And the Navy also has a corps of commissars that oversee the morale and discipline of the naval personnel, much like the Imperial Guard. These are known as the Fleet Commissariat. Now, the Imperial Navy also operate the Naval Security Battalion, which are also known as the Naval Armsmen. These consist of units of armed soldiers intended to put down mutinies, board enemy ships and protect the Imperial naval installations. Usually naval security troopers are equipped with black body armour and shotguns. Now, all naval ships include a corps of Mechanicus personnel who maintain the ship and administer repairs in combat. Now, the Navy is made up of many different types of vessels, from one-man attack fighters to massive battleships that are many miles long, and I will quickly go over their overall classes today, going through basically what each class represents. So, first up are battleships. Now, these are huge vessels with gigantic amounts of weapons and void shields, and usually serve as the flagship for the admiral of the fleet, although this is not always the case. Although powerful, they are very slow to manoeuvre and cannot react quickly to more rapid enemies. Imperial battleships have crews of anywhere between 25,000 and 3 million, depending on the class, although this depends on the source as well. Battleships can be up to 8 kilometres from bow to stern and displace billions of tons. Due to their size and the resources required to make them, a battleship is almost always constructed at the largest Mechanicus shipyards, and can take from decades to centuries to complete fully. Due to their rarity, they are only usually used as frontline ships in critical engagements and are usually used in reserve as command ships. There are various classes of Imperial battleship, but the Emperor and more recent Retribution classes are the most common in the Imperial Navy. The other types of battleship are the Apocalypse class, the Oberon class, the Victory class, and the Nemesis class fleet carrier, which is technically a carrier rather than a battleship, which carries a large number of strike craft. Although smaller than battleships, cruisers are the ships of the line in the Imperial fleet and are regularly used as staples in fleet formations. They have several different subcategories, and so I'll go over those now. The first up and largest are the Grand Cruisers. Now, these are much smaller than battleships but larger than regular cruisers. This class is a remnant from the early days of the Imperium, and their design is different overall from the usual cruiser design, usually lacking the armoured prow and ornamentation of current naval vessels, but are still used in reserve fleets. Some more modern Grand Cruisers exist, but due to their rarity they have simply been added to the Battleship class and are not classified as Grand Cruisers. The known classes of Grand Cruiser are the Vengeance class, the Avenger class and the Exorcist class. Now, battle cruisers are similar to regular cruisers, but are somewhat larger and more heavily armed, using more advanced power distribution systems capable of supporting battleship-grade weaponry on a cruiser hull. The variations are the Armageddon-class battlecruiser, the Mars-class battlecruiser, the Overlord-class battlecruiser, and the Chalice-class battlecruiser. Now, base cruisers make up the majority of fleets, and they are not as powerful as a battleship, but their cruisers are far more manoeuvrable and can still deliver a deadly rain of firepower. There are many classes of cruiser, most based around the same general hull design, but incorporating more combinations of broadside batteries, lance turrets, and starfighter hangars. Now, the crew complement is between 1,000 and 100,000 depending on the source. While still complex ships to design and build, they are far more within the reach of many Forge or Civil worlds, and so within the Imperium are widely produced, if not regularly. Now, the different classes of base cruiser are the Lunar class, the Tyrant class, the Dominator class, the Gothic class, and the Dictator class. Now finally in the cruiser set is something called the light cruisers, although they are a little bit more removed from traditional cruisers than the other examples mentioned. These fall in between the size of a cruiser and the size of an escort, mixing the firepower and hardiness of a cruiser with the speed and manoeuvrability of an escort. They are far more available than cruisers due to their reduced size, and so are the mainstay of patrols and vanguard fleets, with their speed and manoeuvrability making up for their lack of armour. Examples of this class are the Dauntless class, the Endeavour class, the Endurance class, the Defiant class, the Defender class, and the Enforcer class. Finally are the Escort Ships, which are the smallest type of ship in the naval fleet, with two distinct subclasses. The larger of the two are Frigates, which have better armament and are more heavily armoured. Destroyers are generally smaller, but they are far faster and more manoeuvrable than other interstellar warships employed by the Imperial Navy. Now, the frigates and destroyers are usually organised into squadrons of 2 to 6 vessels, and will usually always operate as a group rather than individually to complement their lack of firepower with numbers. Their role is to protect the larger vessels from incoming attack craft, other escorts, and torpedoes, allowing the fleet to position themselves without being hampered. They are also used to pick off damaged enemy ships to allow cruisers to focus on the next foe rather than dealing with the wounded. Most escort classes have a specific role, such as the Cobra-class torpedo destroyers or the Firestorm-class frigate with its armour-piercing prow-mounted lance. Escort ships are normally but no more than 1.5 kilometres in length, with destroyers generally being only 750 metres to 2 kilometres from bow to stern. Examples of this class are the Sword class, the Firestorm class, the Tempest class, the Cobra class, the Falchion class, the Turbulent class, the Claymore class, and the Defence Monitor. Now, the Defence Monitor is a slightly different class because it is actually not capable of travelling between star systems and thus is restricted only to one place. However, they make up for their lack of interstellar travel with incredibly powerful weapons, which usually make it one of the most hard-hitting of the escort classes. Now, there are older and obsolete classes of vessel, and one of the most prominent are the Ironclads. Now, these predate void shields themselves, which is a fairly old technology anyway, and these battleship-sized vessels instead use huge amounts of armour as protection against enemy fire up to hundreds of metres thick. Few, if any, serve actively, with most relegated to duties as system defence vessels. They may also have huge ship-length weapons attached to them to make them extremely dangerous combatants against enemy ships, with some even being just completely stripped of any sort of weapon and actually completely covered and filled with armour and used to ram other ships whose shields have failed, smashing them to pieces on their armoured prows whilst remaining intact. Now, finally today I want to talk about the attack craft and the aircraft. Now, the attack craft of the Imperial Navy differ from the aircraft because they are used in space. These are the Fury Interceptors, which are anti-attack craft vessels, the Starhawk bombers, which are usually used against enemy ships and are protected by the Fury Interceptors, and the Shark Assault Boat, which are usually used to carry armsmen and soldiers across to enemy ships to try and board them and deal damage to them without using their firepower from the outside. Now finally, as I said, the Imperial Navy also has an Aeronautical Arm which deals with all air combat within the planet's atmosphere, thus allowing the Imperium air superiority whenever they're used effectively. Now they have several different classes and I'll go through those. The first one is the Avenger Strike Fighter, which is used as a high-speed, low-level ground attacker, usually using its quick speed to drop its payloads on enemies whilst they can't intercept it due to its low height, preventing anti-aircraft from getting a lock on them. The next up is the Thunderbolt Heavy Fighter, which is primarily designed as an atmospheric fighter craft rather than a starfighter like the Fury, and is typically used as an air superiority fighter. They also use something called the Lightning Fighter, which also is used to establish air superiority but is normally used for reconnaissance due to its higher speed and manoeuvrability over the Thunderbolt, although it lacks the armour and firepower of the Thunderbolt. Also, the Imperial Navy use Marauder bombers, which are gigantic aircraft which are capable of carrying 2,000 kilograms of ordnance. The Marauder also has vector thrust capabilities, allowing it to take off without a runway, meaning it is very capable of being used in a tight area without clear orbital support. Now, the Navy also control a large number of Valkyries, which are the heavily armed airborne assault vehicles with VTOL capabilities of the Imperial Navy. Now, these are the helicopter equivalent of the 41st millennium, and so are used both by the Imperial Navy and the Imperial Guard, although the Imperial Navy will say that it usually has the more experienced pilots. Now, the final two craft controlled by the Imperial Navy are not actually fighter craft. These are the Arvus Lighter and the Aquila Lander. The lighter is used to carry cargo, but also sometimes carrying troops to the battlefield, like the airborne equivalent of a chimera. The Aquila is usually an armed dropship allowing dignitaries from the Imperial Navy or just standard Imperial citizens to land whilst in a war zone, although they can also be used in peacetime. So that's everything I wanted to mention on the Imperial Navy today. I hope that's been helpful. Now, what we'll be doing next is we'll be finishing off some more bits and pieces with the Imperium, but the Horus Heresy is looming on the horizon, and there's very little now between it and myself, and so we'll soon be seeing videos coming out about that. We'll also be taking any questions from the comment section below, so if you have any, please leave them. You can also send me a personal message if you'd rather not leave your question in public. You can also go over to the Vox Relay, which is the Vaults of Terra forum, which allow you to post questions to the community at large and be able to get an answer probably quickly than I can get you. So that's everything today. Thank you for listening. See you next time on the Vaults of Terra.